December 28, 2025. Somewhere over the Caribbean Sea, 240 miles north of Caracas. A CIA officer sitting in a climate-controlled container at Creech Air Force Base in Nevada adjusts his screen and confirms what his sensors are telling him. Target acquired. Venezuelan coastal radar station, Delta 73. The installation that's supposed to be Venezuela's eyes on the northern approach. The early warning system that would give Caracas 30 minutes notice of any incoming threat. He toggles his weapons display. 10 AGM-114 Hellfire missiles hang from the wings of his aircraft. More than enough. He selects two. Designates the target. His hand hovers over the authorization switch. The aircraft he's controlling is 68 feet away, flying at 25,000 feet, but he's not in it. He's 6,000 miles away, drinking coffee that's gone cold, about to start a war that Venezuela's military won't understand until it's already lost. He presses the switch. Two Hellfires drop from the weapon's pylons. Their rocket motors ignite. They accelerate to Mach 1.3. The Venezuelan radar station has 12 seconds to detect the incoming missiles, sound the alarm, and evacuate. The radar never sees them. Not the missiles, not the aircraft that launched them. Nothing. 12 seconds later, the radar station ceases to exist. 36 Venezuelan military personnel cease to exist with it. And the northern approach to Caracas becomes a highway that the Venezuelan military can no longer monitor. This is not the main event. This is the overture. Because over the next 72 hours, the CIA's fleet of MQ-9 Reaper drones, modified with stealth characteristics so advanced that some analysts call them ghosts, will conduct the most sophisticated preparatory bombardment in the history of covert operations. And Venezuela's air defense network, the network that was supposed to make the country invincible, will never fire a single shot in response. Not because they didn't want to, because they never knew the Reapers were there. Let's talk about what a Reaper drone actually is, because most people fundamentally misunderstand these aircraft. They think of drones as remote-controlled toys, surveillance platforms, maybe capable of firing a missile or two at a terrorist hideout. They don't understand what these machines have become. The MQ-9 Reaper is 66 feet long with a wingspan of 84 feet. It can fly for over 27 hours without refueling. It cruises at altitudes up to 50,000 feet. It carries a payload of 3,750 pounds. That payload can include up to 14 AGM-114 Hellfire missiles, or 4 Hellfires plus 2 500-pound laser-guided bombs, or a combination of weapons and surveillance equipment that makes it both hunter and killer. But here's what makes the Reaper truly revolutionary. It's not just unmanned. It's tireless. It doesn't get fatigued, it doesn't get bored, it doesn't make mistakes because the pilot had a bad night's sleep. It can orbit a target for 20 hours straight, watching, learning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when that moment comes, it strikes with a precision that human pilots struggle to match. The standard MQ-9 Reaper is already formidable, but what the CIA deployed against Venezuela wasn't the standard model. Starting in 2021, a program began at Area 51, the classified testing facility in Nevada. The program had a simple goal: make the Reaper invisible. Not figuratively invisible, actually invisible to radar. The challenge was significant. The Reaper was designed for counterterrorism operations in permissive airspace: Afghanistan, Yemen, Somalia. Places where the enemy didn't have sophisticated radar or air defense systems. But what if you wanted to use a Reaper against a near-peer adversary, against an enemy with Russian S-300 systems and Cuban-trained radar operators, against someone who was actually looking for you? The standard Reaper would be detected immediately. Its radar cross-section, the measure of how visible it is to radar, is enormous. The straight wings, the angular fuselage, the external weapons pylons. Everything about its design screams on radar, so the engineers started modifying. They coated the entire airframe with radar-absorbent material, the same compounds used on the F-22 and F-35. They redesigned the engine intake to reduce radar returns. They reconfigured the weapons pylons so missiles could be carried semi-internally, reducing the external profile. They modified the satellite communication domes with radar-transparent materials. The result was an aircraft that looked almost identical to a standard Reaper, but had a radar cross-section reduced by 97%. 97%. On radar, it went from looking like a small airplane to looking like a large bird. Maybe. The CIA called it the Ghost Reaper, and by December 2025, they had 12 of them. On December 26th, 2 days before that first radar station was destroyed, the Ghost Reapers began arriving in their operational theater. They didn't fly from U.S. territory. They didn't fly from Colombia or Brazil or any acknowledged U.S. military base. They flew from a forward operating location that officially doesn't exist, somewhere in the Eastern Caribbean. The beauty of the Reaper's endurance is that you don't need to be close to your target. 200 miles is nothing. 300 miles is routine. The Ghost Reapers could orbit over international waters beyond Venezuela's territorial limits, beyond any legal justification for interference, and still have complete coverage of the entire northern coast. And this is where the mission planning becomes art. The CIA's intelligence on Venezuela's air defense network was comprehensive. They knew the location of every radar station. They knew the overlapping coverage zones. They knew the shift changes. They knew which systems were operational and which were broken. They knew which commanders were competent and which were incompetent. They had quite literally mapped the entire nervous system of Venezuela's military. And then they found the gaps. Because every air defense network has gaps. It's mathematically impossible to have complete coverage. There are always shadows, terrain features that block radar, minimum altitude thresholds, maintenance windows when systems go offline. The question is whether your enemy can find those gaps and exploit them. The CIA found them, and then they widened them. The first wave of strikes, beginning on December 28th, targeted coastal radar stations. Not all of them, just the ones that covered the approaches the CIA wanted to use. The ones that would see the helicopters coming 6 days later during Operation Absolute Resolve. Each strike followed the same pattern. The Ghost Reaper would approach from over the ocean, flying at 25,000 feet. At that altitude, and with its reduced radar signature, it was effectively invisible to Venezuelan coastal radar. The operators would designate their target, usually with laser guidance, sometimes with GPS coordinates accurate to within 3 feet. They would fire 2 Hellfires, maybe 3 if it was a hardened target. The missiles would cover the distance in under 15 seconds. By the time Venezuelan personnel heard the launch, the missiles were already impacting. And here's the thing that made Venezuelan commanders think they were losing their minds. They never saw it coming. The radar screen stayed clear, the sky was empty, and then, without warning, one of their installations would simply explode. The first few times they thought it was sabotage, internal enemies, Colombian special forces sneaking across the border. It took them almost 48 hours to realize they were being bombed from the air, and even then they didn't know by what. By December 30th, the CIA had destroyed or damaged 17 Venezuelan military installations, radar stations, communication hubs, a signals intelligence facility that was monitoring U.S. military communications, a coastal defense missile battery that could have threatened U.S. helicopters, each one carefully selected, each one removing a piece of Venezuela's ability to see and respond to what was coming. But the Ghost Reapers weren't just destroying infrastructure. They were conducting reconnaissance that would make the final operation possible. See, every time a Reaper flies a mission, it's recording. Full motion video, thermal imaging, signals intelligence, communications intercepts. It's not just a weapons platform. It's a flying intelligence collection system. For 6 days, from December 26th to January 2nd, Ghost Reapers orbited over Venezuela for a combined total of over 300 hours. They watched troop movements. They identified air defense positions. They monitored communication patterns. They built a real-time map of Venezuela's entire military posture, and they did it without Venezuela having any idea they were being watched. This is the intelligence that made Operation Absolute Resolve possible. The assault teams that eventually raided Miraflores Palace didn't go in blind. They had 6 days of continuous surveillance. They knew where every Venezuelan unit was positioned. They knew which routes were monitored and which routes were clear. They knew which commanders were alert and which were complacent. By the time the assault helicopters crossed into Venezuelan airspace on January 3rd, the CIA had already won the war. They'd destroyed Venezuela's ability to detect the attack. They'd mapped every defensive position. They'd created corridors through the air defense network that the assault force could fly through without being engaged. The helicopters were just the final act. The Ghost Reapers had written the entire script. Let's talk about the tactical employment of these Hellfires, because this is where drone warfare becomes surgical. The AGM-114 Hellfire missile was originally designed for anti-tank warfare, a helicopter-launched weapon meant to destroy Soviet armor. But over 40 years of continuous development, it's evolved into something far more versatile. The current variants can destroy bunkers, eliminate vehicles, strike buildings, and even target individual people with a precision measured in inches. The warhead weighs 20 pounds, not large by missile standards, but it doesn't need to be large. It needs to be precise, and modern Hellfires are absurdly precise. The laser-guided variant, the one used most frequently during the Venezuela operation, works like this. The Reaper designates a target with a laser invisible to the human eye. The missile homes in on the laser reflection. Once locked, there's essentially no escape. The missile doesn't just hit the building, it hits the specific window the operator selected. It doesn't just hit the vehicle, it hits the driver's compartment, or the engine block, or wherever the operator decides will be most effective. During the 6-day preparation phase before Operation Absolute Resolve, CIA Reapers fired over 60 Hellfire missiles at Venezuelan targets. 60 missiles, 60 hits, 0 misses. That's not luck. That's not even skill. That's technology operating at a level that makes human intervention almost irrelevant. The operator selects the target. The system does everything else. And here's what makes the Ghost Reaper particularly nightmarish from a defensive standpoint. You can't shoot down what you can't see. Venezuela had surface-to-air missiles. They had anti-aircraft artillery. They had all the hardware you'd need to defend against air attack. But all of it requires one thing: detection. You have to know something's there before you can shoot at it. The Ghost Reapers were never detected, not once. Over 300 hours of flight time in contested airspace and Venezuelan air defense never got a solid track. They saw ghosts on their screens occasionally, fleeting returns that appeared and disappeared. Birds, they thought, atmospheric anomalies, equipment malfunctions. Never once did they think, we're being bombed by invisible drones. December 31st, New Year's Eve. A Ghost Reaper operating under the call sign Reaper 7-1 is on station over the Caribbean, monitoring Venezuelan military communications. The crew, operating from Creech Air Force Base, is listening to Venezuelan air defense commanders arguing. The argument is about whether they're under attack. Some commanders insist that the recent explosions must be American strikes. Others argue that's impossible, because their radar hasn't detected anything. The debate goes in circles. No one can agree on what's happening. Reaper 7-1's crew is recording everything. Later, this intercept will be played at planning sessions and CIA analysts will laugh at the confusion. But in the moment, the crew is professional. They're listening for one specific piece of information: whether the Venezuelans have figured out that stealth drones are operating in their airspace. The answer, it becomes clear, is no. The Venezuelans suspect American involvement, but they think it's special forces teams or cruise missiles launched from ships. They have no concept that they're being bombed by aircraft that have been orbiting overhead for days. This intelligence is immediately relayed to the operation commanders planning Absolute Resolve, and it confirms what they suspected. Venezuela is fighting blind. They can proceed. That same night, Reaper 7-1 is tasked with a high-priority strike. A convoy of Cuban intelligence advisors is moving from Miraflores Palace to a secure facility outside Caracas. These are the experts who run Maduro's counterintelligence network. the ones who sweep for bugs and monitor for threats and keep Maduro alive. The convoy is detected by overhead surveillance. Its route is tracked. Its destination is predicted. And Reaper 7-1 is vectored to intercept. The crew waits until the convoy is on an isolated stretch of highway. No civilians nearby. Clear shot. They fire 4 Hellfires in rapid succession, 1 for each vehicle. The missiles impact within 2 seconds of each other. The convoy disintegrates. 12 Cuban intelligence officers die instantly. The survivors, too injured to evacuate, are captured 6 hours later by Venezuelan security forces who have no idea what just happened. This strike, more than any other, breaks Venezuelan counterintelligence. Because those Cubans were the professionals. They were the ones who knew how to detect surveillance, how to find American penetrations, how to keep Maduro safe. Without them, the inner security of the Venezuelan government collapses. The Ghost Reapers didn't just destroy Venezuela's air defenses, they destroyed their intelligence apparatus. They destroyed their ability to understand what was happening to them. January 1st, 2026, 2 days before the raid on Miraflores Palace. The Ghost Reapers shift to a new mission profile. Armed Overwatch. They're no longer striking targets. They're waiting. Orbiting. Watching the approaches to Caracas. Ready to eliminate any threat that might emerge during the final operation. Each Ghost Reaper now carries a full load of 10 Hellfires. Their orders are simple. If any Venezuelan unit attempts to move toward Miraflores Palace during the operation, destroy it. If any air defense system activates and attempts to engage U.S. aircraft, destroy it. If any reinforcement column tries to enter the city, destroy it. They are in effect guardian angels for the assault force, invisible, tireless, armed with enough firepower to obliterate anything that moves. The day before the raid, 3 Ghost Reapers establish a constant orbit over Caracas. 1 north of the city, 1 south, 1 east. They fly in a pattern that ensures complete coverage. At any given moment, at least 2 Reapers have eyes on Miraflores Palace. They watch as Maduro's security forces go through their routines. Shift changes, perimeter patrols, supply deliveries. Everything is recorded. Everything is analyzed, and everything is transmitted in real time to the assault force commanders who are finalizing their plans. This is the modern battlefield. Not soldiers clashing in trenches, not tanks maneuvering for position, just drones flying circles in the sky, watching everything, seeing everything, recording everything. The Venezuelan forces below have no idea they're being observed. They think their actions are secret. They think their routines are secure. They're wrong. They've been wrong for 6 days. And they're about to find out exactly how wrong. January 3rd, 0200 hours, 1 hour and 48 minutes before the assault on Miraflores Palace begins. The 3 Ghost Reapers orbiting Caracas receive new orders. Mission profile change. Active engagement authorized. They are now weapons-free to engage any target that threatens the incoming assault force. The crews at Creech Air Force Base go to heightened alert. Multiple screens display feeds from all 3 Reapers. Other screens show the position of the incoming assault force. Helicopters are 30 minutes out. The entire operation is synchronized to the second. At 0215, a Venezuelan mechanized unit begins moving towards central Caracas. Intel analysis suggests they're repositioning for a shift change, but the movement takes them directly through an approach corridor the assault helicopters will use. The decision is made. They cannot be allowed to reach their destination. Reaper 6-4, orbiting south of the city, is assigned to the target. The crew designates the lead vehicle, then the second, then the third. 3 Hellfires, 3 vehicles, fired in a ripple 5 seconds apart. The missiles take 18 seconds to reach their targets. The Venezuelan unit never knows what hits them. The lead vehicle explodes, then the second, then the third. The convoy stops. Survivors bail out and scatter. The road is blocked with burning wreckage. The assault helicopters alter their route slightly and continue their approach. The Venezuelan unit that should have detected them is now combat ineffective and panicking. At 0240, a Venezuelan air defense radar site that survived the preliminary bombardment suddenly activates. It's one of the older systems, a Soviet-era installation that the CIA planners thought was non-operational. But someone got it working, and now it's sweeping the sky, searching for threats. Reaper 3-2, orbiting north of the city, is assigned the target. 2 Hellfires. The radar installation is destroyed 35 seconds after activation. It never transmitted a contact report. As far as the rest of the Venezuelan air defense network knows, nothing happened. This is how the Ghost Reapers operate. Silent, precise, eliminating threats before those threats even know they're being targeted. The assault force is flying through a battlefield that's being sterilized in real time by invisible aircraft dropping missiles that appear out of nowhere. 0300 hours. The assault helicopters cross into Venezuelan airspace. 70 aircraft, 400 operators, the largest special operations raid in U.S. history. The Ghost Reapers are watching every approach route, every potential threat. Their sensors are peeled for any sign of Venezuelan resistance. And there is none, because there can be none. Every radar that could have detected the helicopters was destroyed days ago. Every communication hub that could have coordinated a response was taken offline. Every unit that could have moved to intercept has either been destroyed or is trapped in position, unable to communicate, unable to move without being obliterated from the sky. The Venezuelan military is paralyzed, and they don't even understand why. At 0348, when the assault team breaches Maduro's safe room, when the Venezuelan president is taken into custody, the Ghost Reapers are still overhead, still watching, still waiting for a threat that will never materialize. They remain on station for another 3 hours, providing Overwatch as the assault force evacuates with their prize. Only when the last helicopter is safely out of Venezuelan airspace do the Reapers disengage and return to their forward operating base. Total flight time for the 3 Reapers providing Overwatch during the raid: 84 hours combined. Total Hellfires expended during the actual assault: 5. All 5 destroyed Venezuelan units that attempted to respond to the raid. All 5 destroyed before they could engage U.S. forces. 0 U.S. aircraft were lost. 0 U.S. personnel were killed. The Ghost Reapers made sure of that. Let's talk about what Venezuelan military analysts discovered when they finally pieced together what happened to them, because the debrief is almost more devastating than the defeat itself. In the days following Maduro's capture, Venezuelan air defense commanders were questioned by the transitional government and by U.S. military intelligence. The questions were simple. Why didn't you detect the attack? Why didn't you respond? Why did your entire air defense network fail? The commanders had no good answers. They described what they experienced: radar malfunctions, communication failures, installations exploding without warning. They described the confusion, the conflicting reports, the sense that they were being attacked by ghosts. When they were shown the truth, when U.S. intelligence briefed them on the Ghost Reaper program and showed them the actual flight paths of the drones that had been orbiting over Venezuela for 6 days, the reaction was physical. Some commanders refused to believe it. Others broke down. One senior officer, a general with 30 years of experience, simply stared at the display and said nothing for 10 minutes. Because what they were being shown was impossible. Except it wasn't impossible, it happened. They lived through it. They just never saw it. The radar logs were analyzed. Experts went through hundreds of hours of recordings, looking for any trace of the Ghost Reapers. They found exactly 4 instances where something appeared on radar that might have been a drone. 4 instances over 6 days, and 300 hours of flight time. And even those 4 contacts were so brief and so faint that the operators dismissed them as errors. The Venezuelan Air Defense Network, the network that cost billions of dollars and was supposed to protect the country from exactly this kind of attack, had a detection rate of 1.3%. 1.3%. For all practical purposes, the Ghost Reapers were invisible. This is what defeat looks like in modern warfare. Not armies surrendering, not cities burning, just men staring at displays showing flight paths they never saw, kills they never detected, a battle they never knew they were losing. The implications of the Ghost Reaper program are still being processed by military establishments worldwide, because this changes everything about drone warfare. For years, the conventional wisdom was that drones were useful in permissive environments, but vulnerable in contested airspace. You could use them in Afghanistan, but you'd never use them against Russia or China, or any enemy with sophisticated air defenses. The standard Reaper was simply too visible, too slow, too vulnerable. The Ghost Reaper breaks that assumption. It proves that with sufficient modification, drones can operate in contested airspace. They can penetrate air defense networks, they can strike targets that are supposed to be protected, and they can do it with an endurance and precision that manned aircraft can't match. This is terrifying for several reasons. First, it means that the safe rear areas, the places where commanders and headquarters and support units are supposed to be protected, are no longer safe. If a Ghost Reaper can orbit over Caracas for 6 days without being detected, it can orbit over Beijing or Moscow or Tehran. It can wait. And when the time is right, it can strike. Second, it means that air defense networks are less valuable than previously thought. Venezuela invested billions in Russian systems. They deployed them correctly. They operated them professionally, and it didn't matter. The Ghost Reapers simply ignored everything. Third, and perhaps most important, it means that the United States has a capability that no other nation can match. China has drones, Russia has drones, Iran has drones, but none of them have Ghost Reapers. None of them have spent the years and the billions required to develop true stealth characteristics for unmanned systems. The gap in capability is enormous, and everyone knows it now, because the CIA made sure everyone knows. They could have kept the Ghost Reaper classified, they could have attributed the strikes to something else. But they didn't. They deliberately let it be known that invisible drones bombed Venezuela for 6 days and were never detected. That's not just a military capability. That's a deterrent message. A warning to every other adversary. We can do this to you too. Your air defenses won't work. Your radar won't see us. Your country is not safe. On January 6, 2026, 3 days after Operation Absolute Resolve, the Department of Defense released a statement acknowledging that MQ-9 Reaper variants conducted preparatory strikes in support of the operation. They did not specify how many strikes. They did not specify how the Reapers evaded detection. They did not specify anything except that the strikes occurred and were successful. The statement was brief, clinical, and absolutely terrifying to anyone who understood its implications. Because if the Ghost Reapers can do this to Venezuela, a country that spent decades preparing for American attack, what can they do to smaller nations? What can they do to terrorist organizations? What can they do to any target, anywhere in the world, at any time? The answer, it seems, is anything. The Ghost Reapers can do anything. There's a phrase in military circles, the tyranny of distance. It means that no matter how powerful your military, you're limited by how far you can project force. You can only strike targets within range of your aircraft or missiles. Geography matters. Distance matters. The Ghost Reaper breaks the tyranny of distance. With a 27-hour endurance, it can launch from anywhere and strike anywhere. With satellite control, it can be operated from the other side of the planet. With precision weapons, it can eliminate specific targets with zero collateral damage. Distance doesn't matter anymore. Geography doesn't matter anymore. There is no safe rear area. There is no sanctuary. If the United States decides you're a target, a Ghost Reaper can be overhead in hours, and you'll never know until the hellfire impacts. This is the future of warfare, not the future, the present, because it's already happening. The Ghost Reapers are already operational. They're already proven, and they're already hunting. Maduro's security was baffled when CIA Ghost Reapers armed with 10 Hellfires ignored every radar. But bafflement is a luxury reserved for those who survive. For the 17 Venezuelan installations destroyed in the preparatory bombardment, there was no bafflement, just sudden, violent death delivered from an enemy they never saw. The Ghost Reaper program represents a paradigm shift in covert action. Historically, if the CIA wanted to eliminate a target in a hostile country, they had limited options. They could insert operators risking capture or death. They could use cruise missiles, which were detectable and attributable. They could use sabotage, which was slow and unreliable. Or they could use traditional drones, which only worked in countries without air defenses. Now they have a fifth option, an aircraft that can orbit over enemy territory for days, that can strike multiple targets with precision, that can collect intelligence while waiting to strike, that can operate in contested airspace, and that leaves the enemy confused, demoralized, and helpless. The psychological impact alone is devastating. Imagine being a military commander in a country hostile to the United States. You know what happened in Venezuela. You know that for 6 days, American drones circled over Caracas, bombing targets at will, and no one saw them. You look at your own air defenses and wonder, would they detect the Ghost Reapers? Would your radar see them? Would your operators recognize the threat before it's too late? And you don't know. You can't know. Because the United States isn't sharing the details of how the Ghost Reaper works. You don't know what makes it stealthy. You don't know its radar cross-section. You don't know its vulnerabilities. You just know it exists. It's invisible and it's hunting. That's not a military advantage. That's a psychological weapon. That's the kind of capability that makes enemies reconsider their options before they even begin. The final tally from the Ghost Reaper operation is now public. 6 days of operations. 63 Hellfire missiles fired. 17 military installations destroyed. 54 Venezuelan military vehicles destroyed or damaged. Over 200 Venezuelan military personnel killed. 0 Ghost Reapers detected. 0 Ghost Reapers damaged. 0 Ghost Reapers lost. Those numbers tell a story, not just a story of technological superiority, though that's certainly part of it. A story of dominance so complete that the enemy never had a chance. This is what happens when a generational gap in military technology meets perfect execution. The Ghost Reapers weren't lucky. They weren't facing incompetent enemies. Venezuela had professional military forces and sophisticated equipment. They were trained. They were prepared. They were vigilant. It didn't matter. The technological advantage was so vast that vigilance became irrelevant. Preparation became meaningless. Training became useless. Because you can't fight what you can't see. The Venezuelan radar operators weren't incompetent. They were obsolete. Their equipment wasn't broken. It was inadequate. Their tactics weren't wrong. They were from the wrong century. And now, everyone knows it. Every military in the world is reassessing their air defense networks, knowing that if they couldn't detect the Ghost Reapers, their systems are probably just as obsolete. Every dictator with a bunker is looking at the sky and wondering if there's a Reaper up. They're right now, invisible, waiting. Because that's the genius of the Ghost Reaper program. It's not just that it works, it's that the enemy knows it works. The deterrent value comes not from secrecy, but from demonstrated capability. The CIA showed the world what the Ghost Reaper can do, and now the world is terrified. Somewhere over international waters, a Ghost Reaper is on station right now. Maybe over the Caribbean, maybe over the South China Sea, maybe over the Persian Gulf. The crew operating it is sitting in Nevada, drinking coffee, watching their screens. 10 Hellfires hang from the wings. The aircraft has enough fuel for 22 more hours of flight time. They're waiting, watching, recording everything, and no one below has any idea they're there. That's the new normal. That's the world the Ghost Reaper created. A world where the sky is never empty, even when radar says it is. A world where every military installation, every government building, every convoy moving on, every road is potentially being watched by an invisible eye that can turn lethal in seconds. Maduro's security was baffled when the Ghost Reapers ignored every radar. But bafflement turned to horror when they realized the implications. That their air defense network was useless. That their Russian systems were obsolete. That they'd been bombed for 6 days and never knew it was happening. That horror is now shared by every adversary of the United States. because they're all wondering the same thing. Is there a ghost reaper overhead right now? Is it watching? Is it waiting? And when it strikes, will we see it coming? The answer to all three questions is probably yes. Probably yes, and definitely no. Welcome to the age of the invisible drone, where radar is useless, where air defenses are theater, where the sky is full of ghosts carrying hellfires, and where the only sound you'll hear is the impact. By then, it's already too late.